My straightforward amendment would cut the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, or ATF, by 20%. That would result in $250 million worth of savings. Let me make one thing clear. I know that the ATF has an important mission to play in keeping our nation safe and regulating everything from firearms to alcohol. That said, in the last few years, we have seen an outrageous growth in operations and regulations coming out of the ATF. How could we forget the fast and furious gun trafficking scheme that was allowed to go so far off track that 2,000 guns were allowed to flow to Mexican drug trafficking groups? Worst of all, a federal law enforcement officer was killed with a gun from that operation. There was Operation Fearless, where an undercover operation in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, went horribly wrong. Convicted felons were given access to weapons. The fake storefront was burglarized, and $39,000 in merchandise was lost. The ATF even used someone with developmental disabilities in the operation and ultimately arrested him for his involvement. From Wichita, Kansas, to Portland, Oregon, to Atlanta, Georgia, the stories of botched operations and inappropriate action just goes on and on. Then there was the ATF's recent attempt to reclassify common M855 ammunition as armor-piercing despite its exemption from this classification since 1986 for sporting purposes. Thankfully, this proposal was dropped after pressure from Congress. Mr. Chairman, the people I represent in Southwest Alabama are tired of a federal government that doesn't live within its means. They want to see their elected officials in Washington get serious about making cuts to the federal bureaucracy. My constituents also are tired of executive overreach and the federal government involving itself in areas where it simply doesn't belong. I know that the committee and Chairman Culbertson have made real efforts to rein in the ATF, and I appreciate those efforts. I also understand that ATF is now under new leadership, and I hope that the new leaders get serious about much-needed reforms. I am all for safety and responsible gun ownership, and the ATF does have a role to play in that. But this amendment would simply require ATF to return to its core functions and responsibilities. It would cause ATF to look at itself in the mirror, find areas where they can cut back, and refocus on their true priorities. Ultimately, this amendment is about protecting our Second Amendment rights while also pushing for real reforms to federal spending. And I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. I reserve the balance of my time.